Thank you, Isabel. Do you remember the first time you remember seeing the moon? I'll tell you about mine. It's the summer of 1969. It was a July night, and I had been tucked into bed long ago by Mom and Dad, and my father came into the room and rustled me by the shoulder and said, "Hey, little man, come out here, I want you to see something." And he walked me out into the family room where there was that opalescent glow that only a black and white television can make. Some of you know that. And he said, "There's a man about to walk on the moon, and I want you to see it." And I was totally into the astronaut thing. I was an astronaut. And we watched Neil Armstrong take one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And my response was, I want to go see him. And so I hauled my parents outside at 11 o'clock at night in Northern California to look up through the trees and to see the moon. And I couldn't see Neil Armstrong. And I'm not sure if it went just like this, but I know this story is true. Somewhere in that moment, either my mother or I said to the other, "I love you to the moon." And I think it was like the farthest thing we could imagine in that moment. And it's been 40-some years since that night in July in 1969. But there is almost no time in which my mother and I part, either by phone call from California or when we are in each other's presence, where she doesn't pause and say to me, "I love you to the moon." And if you happen to be in our presence when that happens, you might say to yourself, "Isn't that nice? Mom loving her son." But now that you know this story, attached to a history and attached to 4 decades of a parent loving a child through the simplest words and a great memory of a moment that will never be repeated, it means more, doesn't it? And if I ever happen to see you around town and say, "I love you to the moon," we will share something that no one around us will know. You have practices like this, don't you? Practices in your family with words, with deeds that if others witnessed them, they might think, "How cute," or "Wow, that's weird." But that's only because they don't know the story behind the story. They don't know the meaning that has been made, that makes simple words and simple deeds deeply meaningful. And we know something about this as a community, don't we? If you've been a part of Fountain Street Church for a little bit, you've probably had this experience called trying to explain Reverence for Life Sunday to someone who's never been there. It goes something like this. You're at a party, you're in your front lawn about March, and you're starting to get excited about Reverence for Life coming, and if you don't know what that is, it goes like this. We take a Sunday and we invite animals of every flavor to come into our sanctuary, and it's really loud, and sometimes it smells bad. And we dedicate the entire service to the importance and the meaning of these animals in our lives, and we actually bring them forward, and the ministers have an opportunity to bless people with their animals. And we're getting so excited, and all of a sudden, our Catholic friend looks at us and says, "Why would you do that?" And there is a moment there, isn't there, when we don't really know why. We know that it makes sense, and we know that it meets us at an important, deep, almost archetypal level. But can we explain it to our friends or to strangers or to even visitors to our community in a way that would give it the kind of weight we know it holds? Are we aware when people ask us about our history and our traditions that we have been landed in that moment when Jeremiah says to us, "Seek the welfare of the city who has exiled you, and there you will find your own welfare"? Because until everyone in Grand Rapids knows the power and the beauty of reverence for life or of Halloween, these things that only we do, we will not find our fullest abundance. Our welfare will not increase. So what should we do? I want to suggest that our response, our responsibility, has something to do with that practice that I invited you to with the angels, with remembering and keeping. If we are going to be the stewards of great traditions with powerful and deep meanings, we have an equal responsibility to keep them alive and to share them with the city who has made us something of a house of exile. If you're here today, you probably know something of what it means to feel like an exile in your own city. Amber Fox was talking about that here, coming from a place, her birth home, that left her as a certain kind of exile. And the response to exile, so says Jeremiah in his deep and ancient wisdom, is not to dismiss or to diminish or to try to destroy those who would say you are separate, you are other, you are just plain wrong. Our response must be one that seeks the welfare of those who inquire as to why we would do such things. Remembering and keeping are not just personal responsibilities, they are our communal duty. Because it is not possible for one person or even a staff of people to remember and keep traditions as broad and deep and long as are practiced here at Fountain Street. And it's not just reverence for life. We're coming up a couple of Sundays from now on an extraordinary, really one of the oldest and richest of traditions, which is only found within these walls, Halloween. Do you know the story behind the story? So when someone asks you, "I hear you have a strange masked character called Oz," you have something to say other than just a surface knowledge of what it is that we do. Do we know why we do it? And we have the March of the Goblins. And on the surface, it looks like nothing more than a parade full of kids in costumes that look fun and cute. But there is more there. More to remember. More to keep. And so I have made it my work these last couple of weeks to spend time in the archives of Fountain Street and to talk with old ministers and those who were here in the 50s when it all began. And I want to give you a piece of that history today so that you might have something more to remember with, so that we then, 2 weeks from now, might keep something in a way which meets the profound responsibility Jeremiah calls us to do something that means more than simply what it looks like on the surface.